Okay, once again, good afternoon, everyone. I believe we can now start with our webinar. We already have the attendees for this afternoon. We have people from QRC and SWIFT. My name is Erica, and I am the web content writer and designer for QRC, and I will be co-hosting today's webinar with our speakers, our very own QRC CEO, Mr. Vamsi Krishna Muramganti, and of course, our partner from Step Forward, Ms. Lone Anderson. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here and joining this afternoon's webinar. Thank you for carving out the time from your very busy schedule to spend a portion of your day here to get a thorough understanding of the objectives, principles, and controls of the SWIFT CSCF framework v2021. I also wanted to inform everyone that today's webinar is just one of the many more webinars that we will be hosting intended for the global market. This is QRC's initiative together with Step Forward to provide awareness of the latest standards to the different industries. With that being said, welcome to today's webinar. I hope you learn a lot, and I highly encourage everyone to be interactive and ask questions. You can type in and send your questions in the chat box, and we will answer them by the end of the presentation during our Q&A session. We have here with us this afternoon experts in the field who can surely answer any of your relevant questions to today's topic. Again, if you need to clarify something or want to ask something, please do so by typing your questions in the chat box. To officially start, today's speaker will be talking about SWIFT CSP maintaining compliance with v2021. Our first speaker today is the CEO of QRC Solutions Private Limited, a seasoned professional of payment card industry security standard certifications like PCI DSS, PA DSS, PCI SSF, PCI, and many more. Having more than 20 plus years of extensive experience in the areas of information security, data privacy, security compliance audits, and helping enterprises and SMEs become more secure from the internal and external cyber threats. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Vamsi Krishna Muramganti. Our second speaker is a partner and head APAC from Step Forward. She is a senior consultant. She is a senior international executive with a background in fintech, customer service, partner and alliances management, professional services, operations, and business development. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Ms. Lone Anderson. And now I will be giving the floor to our speakers to start. Mr. Anderson and Ms. Anderson and Mr. Muramganti, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Erica, for the nice, introduction. And I would like to, speak, Mr. Lone Anderson to say a few words about this webinar, and then probably we can start from that point onwards. Hi, Lone.
Hi, Vamsi. Thank you very much. And Erica, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm nearly blushing here, seeing how many years and how much stuff I've done. Vamsi and I started talking quite a few months back and talked about the synergies between the business that QRC does and what Step Forward does. So at Step Forward, we're on the consulting side of things. I'm a banker. A lot of my colleagues are bankers or come from big consultancy companies. We understand how payments work, how they are used within a banking environment. So we bring sort of the business side of things, and with QRC, with their expertise in the SWIFT area, in security, in payments, and so on. It was, I suppose, a marriage that needed to happen, right? So we've recently joined, and I suggested that we have a webinar, a joint webinar where we talked about it so we can start getting the, spreading the news in terms of what it is that we do. And we all know that SWIFT is fast, at SWIFT pace, moving towards a mandated third party assessment certification. And between QRC and Step Forward, our objective is to provide that with consultants from a business side and from a risk perspective. Back over to you.
Thanks, Lon. So myself, people call me Krishna, and yeah, I'm having quite a number of years of experience in this. And today we are going to discuss about a very special, the domain, the area that is SWIFT CSCF framework. That's what I understand. So when it comes to the SWIFT, it's very popularly, I mean, last few years, it become very popular among the financial domain. So that too, after certain kind of, the breaches happened in a couple of years back. So the SWIFT become very, very stringent about the improvising the security within the SWIFT users, the institution. So that's how actually we are talking about the customer security program. This is introduced by the SWIFT, and we as a security cyber security the firm, and we working with a couple of customers wherein the customers looking for the how to comply with this the new the frameworks. That's predominantly we call it as a CSCF, but it is a part of the umbrella of CSP, the customer security program. So when it comes to the customer security program, it is having I mean in last few years, if you look at the industry looking after the how to secure that enter the transactions from end to end, that is one of the biggest challenge for most of the institutions and most of the industry players. So definitely we need a very strong and robust framework and some guidance to follow, so that we can assure to our end users or the community to protect the data. And also whenever we are doing any kind of a specific transactions, the transaction data is always it is secured, and no one can play with the data. I mean, they cannot alter, modify or anything, So always we have to make sure we have to, sorry, just one moment. Yeah. So when we are talking about the end-to-end transaction security of the transactions, it's very important most of the time to follow one rigorous and robust framework to make sure the transaction data is secured. Okay, so no one can play or interfere or interception kind of attacks. We can avoid interception or interruptions attacks. Okay, so that's the main purpose. So that's how actually the SWIFT, as a very reputed organization across the globe, helping so many financial institutions to make this kind of a transactions. So they come up with the customer security program. So basically in this particular session, we are going to discuss, even though there is a lot of guidelines already published by the SWIFT time to time, and also the SWIFT themselves, they conduct so many webinars regarding how to make this. But as a part of the community, and we thought let us give our way of looking at the things, and maybe yes, it's a kind of a small awareness type, what is required, so that we can help few of the members of our same community. So that's the interest. That's basically, this is a customer security program, and we are going to discuss about the requirements of the CSP. We call this the short form is a CSP, and the latest version of customer security control framework, because every year generally they publish the various versions, and sometimes they add on some kind of a controls, and sometimes they may delete, or sometimes it may merge certain controls. So it is always better to refer the latest framework which is recently published. That's the current one is the V version 2021. So when we do some specific assessments towards the CSCF, that's we have to follow the latest framework. And the good part is the good part of this assessments is the SWIFT is so much. I mean, they provide all the kind of assessment templates to exactly what at a third party assessors, what kind of areas to be looked upon, and how to what to check exactly, and what would be the status of each category of the control. So this is very important. So then what is generally the scope of the SWIFT? I mean, when we are talking about the CSCF, generally most of the organization, they know every year they have to attest the results of these assessments, the compliance towards the CSCF. So what is the scope of this assessment? And that's what. And also being a security subject matter security experts, so what is our approach, and what is the guidelines stating about the timelines for this attestations and etc. And when, as an organization, when you are looking for some kind of a third-party assessors to come and do assessment, independent assessments, probably, this is the right word, the independent assessments towards the CSCF, then what would you need to look at as an independent auditor? What would be their qualifications, or the experience, or what is required, so that they can perform the work independently, without any unbiasedness, and transparently. So with the quality, that's very important to understand. So this is what we are going to discuss today. Now look at the what is this overall customer security program? Basically, it is having three different parts altogether. One is secure and protect. That's exactly the organizations, the institutions who are generally what we called it is a SWIFT user companies, user institutions. Generally, overall in the entire framework, they call it as a users. Okay, the user, the entity as an entity, how to protect, how to secure themselves. I mean, when I'm talking about secure themselves towards their processes, or the SWIFT infrastructure, and the people who are involved to do this, transactions, initiation of the transactions. So predominantly it is a end-to-end transaction security we are talking about. And as an organization, we are supposed to look inside and make sure our systems are so robust, so no one can interfere in that. So this is very first important aspect, and that's a secure and protect ourselves as an organization, as a safety user. Second one is our counterparts. It's generally the users. Generally, because of the lot of advancement in the technology and the globalization, it is not like we are alone. I mean, we always integrate with the interface with some other entities. They are our counterparts. So we make sure it's not about only us. We have to protect them. Definitely, the self-defense is 100% important here. But at the same time, once you are secured, and you also there is a provisions in the CSP to make sure your counterparts also follow the good practices, so that you can help them to protect or prevent any kind of attacks through the counterparts. So it is always a give and take. So that kind of a things is also there. It's not about only our organization, also whoever connecting with us, whoever our counterparts, make sure any kind of such incidents or anything happen, that the information flowing from one entity to another entity. And also we have to discuss. We are going to discuss about how to prevent and detect such kind of adapt patterns, and how to prevent such kind of things with our counterparts. The third one is as a whole community. Always whatever the acquired knowledge and some key areas we can share among our community, and make sure everybody is aware of the developments, and insights of this program. So it is overall, it is a framework, right? I mean, it's a program. It's everybody to commit for this. One is myself, how to, as an organization, user community, I'm supposed to be secure, and also I can help my counterparts to prevent and preventing any such kind of malicious attacks or anything. And also it's a overall community has to be protected by sharing the time to time the knowledge and everything. So this is how actually this is parted. And if you look at this with respect to the view, and it's basically that's where the CSCF, what we are talking about, the particular framework. So any organization, how they want to make sure they are secure, they are protected. So where there is a customer security control framework is published, and the versions, okay, every time the versions will change, but a current version is this. And from there, actually, every users supposed to follow the customer security policy, control policy, so which defines what kind of systems we should have, what kind of process we should implement. I mean, again, it is always so one of the famous thing, the people, process, technology. This is where what kind of systems we should build ourselves to protect from protection. Okay. Definitely, yes, there are because Swift is also provision a lot of hardened products for the users while we communicating with the Swift network and also doing any kind of a transaction. So there is very good information is available, and this is how actually we can achieve this secure and protect one of the element, the part of that element. And counterparts, prevent and detect daily. I mean, whatever the validation reports and sender payment control services and the relationship. There is an application where we can add on our counterparts information and we can see them. And community-wise, yes, industry anonymous information we can publish, and also even Swift having the portal wherein there is continuously they are providing lot much information. So this is how actually these three parts are covered under the Swift CSP. So mainly the focus is today, our focus is understanding the CSCF framework, the latest framework, that is 2021. And here again, it's categorically, there are three main objectives of this program. One is secure our environment, and know and limit access. And third is detect and respond. So these are the three main core objectives, and then it is divided into 8 principles. We can see that how to restrict the internet access and segregate, critical systems. Predominantly, we are talking about the Swift infrastructure, and also so what kind of remediation we are supposed to do to reduce the impact and reduce the attack vectors, and how to secure the physically secure the environment. This is very, very important, to secure the infrastructure, which is Swift architecture. The secure zone, how to protect the systems from any kind of a physical damage or any unauthorized access, physical access. So know and limit access, definitely it is definitely it's much more, I guess it's much more focusing on the access controls, the role based access controls, and etc. And the detect and respond, like kind of incident management, and detect monitoring users activities and detect any kind of suspicious activities, and etc. So basically all these 8 principles, and again there are 31 controls. Again 31 controls, again they're divided into the two ways. One is the mandatory controls, and another one is the advisory controls. The mandatory controls, and another one is the advisory controls. The mandatory controls, all types of users supposed to mandatorily attest and comply with the specific controls, and advisory controls are not. It is up to the optional kind of controls. It's up to the organization what to implement, how to protect, how to comply with the specific requirements. So even that CSCF, the templates which Swift generally provides is also mandatory control, attestation thing, and also even advisory controls also. So, but what we need to understand here is the mandatory controls has to be attested every year and inform, provide the compliance status to the Swift through the respective channels, and advisory is optional kind of a thing. So this is what generally the CSCF, the framework covers. Now look at the when we are getting into the deeper level, then secure your environment, again as we discussed, restrict internet access, or protect critical systems from the general IT environment, and reduce attack surface and vulnerabilities. This is a third principle, and physically secure the environment is the fourth principle. So let us get on inside what exactly as a user community, a user safety user, what we are, how to implement or what to look at to meet the specific requirements. So the low and limit access, prevent compromise in credentials, manage identity and segregate privileges. This is already we just discussed. Control objectives, and third principle is the detect and respond, and control objectives are anonymous activity and systems, and plan for incident response and information sharing. Okay, when we are discussing about the secure environment, now it is very important to understand how to secure our environment. One is restrict internet access and protect critical systems from general IT environment. Okay, so definitely the first the control is Swift environment protection. It talks about how to protect the local Swift infrastructure. I mean, as I mentioned, when we are talking about the infrastructure, most of the companies, they generally just follow the specific architecture types. It could be A1 architecture, A2 architecture, or A3 or A4, or maybe B. So when any organization implements, they're using that specific architecture types, so they have to make sure this infrastructure is located wherever it is located. It should have a proper secured environment. Okay, secured IT environment, and also restrict and control. I mean, like who can access these particular specific systems. Okay, so as we know, every system is having the user level and operations level, or maybe the administrative level. The controls and privileges generally we will provide. So every time, it means you have to follow the very specific process to allocate the required privileges to the people who are having the responsibility. I mean, I would say in short, role-based access controls. I mean, that's what we are supposed to predominantly follow so that we can meet up this specific requirement. Okay. Further, as we know, when we are talking about the physical and the platform protection virtualization, because generally, as we know, most of the time nowadays organizations use the virtual platforms to create different types of servers. So even though individual servers wise we harden the systems and everything, but at the same time, most of the time the organization, they may fail into protecting the actual virtual platforms, as a virtual hosting machines. So it should be every organization supposed to take care of how to protect the physical host of the virtual platform. Okay, this is very important, and also how we protect the access. That is also very important here. Okay, and when it comes to the direct internet access, it is one of the vulnerability highest risk factor to, if you are allowing whichever systems inside of your organization, if you are allowing any internet access, you have to take utmost care what kind of a traffic you are actually allowing inside and access your internal systems. This is very important. So generally, we can avoid this, direct access by developing, creating a DMG zone or something, so that you can understand what kind of a traffic you are receiving, and if it is as per the business requirement and it's at most required to do the allow that traffic, then probably yes, we can allow that. So we can implement, organization can look after some kind of implementation related to the DMG or something. So this is how actually you can control the traffic, internet access from outside to inside. Okay. Send reduce attack surface and vulnerabilities when we are talking about the second objective. So basically we need to understand, always we have to understand what kind of a data, the internal data, how we can ensure the confidentiality, that's another persons should not able to access our data, and integrity. Any unauthorized alterations and modifications, updations should be avoided, and authenticity of the data, it's as real. I mean, no one can non-repudiation the things between local Swift infrastructure related applications to their operators. Basically, generally, what is generally happens here, there is an infrastructure as we're discussing. There is an architecture, that's what we call it the Swift infrastructure, or maybe the related applications, we might be using the user community. And when the operator sitting at outside of that environment, and when they access to this infrastructure or architecture to initiate the transaction, so the data flow has to be secured, between these two environments. So this is very important. And further, whatever infrastructure which we are currently deployed, we have to have the process called the proper security updates. Depends on the criticality of the updates. Sometimes it is related to the critical security patches. We must patch that within the specific time, like maybe 30 days or something. So there should be a process to identify the latest patches applicable for your environment and particular systems, and then you have to have the process called testing that patches, whether it is applicable, whether it is compatible with the systems in place, and if it is compatible, and it is mandatory to update update the systems. So you have to have kind of a process here. Generally, the patch management process or anything, we should implement that. And further, you should also think of conducting regular testings, and maybe the scan, vulnerability scans, to understand what kind of new threats are coming up, and new vulnerabilities are identified within the infrastructure. So you can take timely actions to avoid any kind of a negative impact on the systems. Further, yes, the system hardening, whenever whenever you install the new systems, or maybe on a time-to-time basis, it is always better to look for harden the systems, so that it can prevent or it can defend any kind of malicious attacks. This is very important. Generally, I can see that in the general normal circumstances, the organizations, they do this. Most of the organizations, they do at the time of the initial installation. But after that, they generally they don't practice this as a regular thing. So, but it is highly recommended to have this kind of a config audits or hardening audits on your systems on a time-to-time basis. At least there is nothing nowhere it is mentioned, but at least annually, to see whether your systems are robust enough to prevent or defend such kind of malicious attacks or not. So here it is very important to make sure, at least at the beginning and also later stages at a frequency, you can define your own policy for that, and see whether your systems are how good they are, and if required, as per the best practices, industry practices, when you come to know that certain configurations is not up to the mark, they may need to revise or maybe a little improvisation. So make sure you further. It's not about only the infra related applications, but whichever applications from the back office side, generally what has happened, the Swift applications are there, but something, it should be, the transaction should be initiated from the back, and some kind of a data or the integration or interaction happen with the other non-Swift related applications as well. So it's not about only we are taking care of the Swift application, Swift infrastructure, security only, but even if there are cases where the back office systems are interacting with this Swift infrastructure, so we should should see what kind of a data it is flowing between the non-Swift to Swift, and make sure the flow is we maintain at all times the confidentiality of the data and also integrity and authenticity. Okay. Definitely, when we are talking about that, it's not about the internal transmission. Even the data, when we are actually sending outside of your premises, protect the Swift related data transmitted outside of the secure zone. So this is every organization, they are supposed to take care of this. Further, yes, operator session confidentiality, integrity. Again, operator sessions, because somebody, generally the operators, they use some specific applications to connect into the local Swift infrastructure. So this has to be, again, maintain the security, probably the channel of the communication, how they are actually communicating, how they are actually connecting to the infrastructure. It has to be generally it should be encrypted channels. That is how actually we should take it this, and hence the confidential integrity always you can maintain. Okay. So generally what is happens, we can look at this as, already we're discussing about the three things here. One is the Swift secure zone. That is where actually as an organization you keep your secure Swift related architecture, Swift related infrastructure. That's one part. Second part is the operators who are actually connecting with this infrastructure to initiate some kind of transactions. So this is a operators zone, predominantly we can say that, and they are actually regularly connecting, going to connect with the infrastructure. The third category is what I can see this, how I can look at this as a back office. I mean, whichever institutes, whether it is a bank or any other financial institutes, what kind of applications are actually connecting to this Swift infrastructure. So these are already the three, and the fourth one is the outside. From the data when the operator initiated some kind of a transaction, the application, Swift applications, related applications process that, and then they are actually transmitting the data outside of your network. What kind of precautions we should take so that that entire communication is always at all times we should maintain the authenticity, integrity, and confidentiality of the data. So this is how actually we can look at these things. And as I mentioned already, the vulnerability scanning process. It is an organization. It is always one of the best thing to do. It is a bare minimum control. Every organization is supposed to follow so that they can understand what kind of a security, what kind of vulnerabilities that exist in their environment, so that they can take actions on those and remediating the vulnerabilities. Or sometimes you can minimize by doing practicing very specific actions on that, initiate some actions. Okay, so vulnerability scanning is very, very much important, and we cannot neglect this, definitely. Further, the critical activity, if there is anything you outsource some of the activities which impact your Swift infrastructure, definitely please we need to follow a thorough kind of responsibility and deal with that, outsourcing activities, who is that vendors or, third party providers, what kind of engagement engagement conditions are there, who is responsible for what, and also whether are they providing, the 100% secured activities, secure manner or not. So all these things we have to look at as a definitely we have to do the due diligence before going with some kind of outsourcing activities, and definitely you have to get a confidence of how well they provide the services without impacting the infrastructure. So, and if there are any potential risks identified better, you have to do the proper risk assessment. Definitely the risk assessment is one of the very best tool. It is in our hand to understand the risk factors, and probably we can prevent lot many things, before they occur. This is very much important with respect to, risk management point of view. So better to have the proper risk assessment of these activities, understand what kind of a risk is involved, how much it can impact if it is really exploited or, happened, how much it would impact on the SWIFT infrastructure, and what is the remediation measures we can consider, further to reducing the risk levels, and all. Even sometimes we can avoid the kind of risk by eliminating that entire cause, and further it may mitigate by taking some precautionary actions. So, but it has to happen. So this is very important. It's not about, I suggest, it's not for only the outsourcing activities, but it's always better to have our internal systems also for all the internal activities, internal people, internal infrastructure, everything. We have to do proper, robust, risk assessment, so we can understand something before happening. Transaction business controls. Definitely when we are talking about transactions activities, definitely we have to look after whether the transactions are valid and validated and within the limits. This is very important to take care of this business controls and application hardening. Yes, already we discussed about what is the importance of the hardening of the systems. When we do hardening, it means we are, that specific system component. I would call it as application is one of the system component. It is so hardened that it can prevent or defend any such kind of, attack, surface of the attacks. So definitely we have to not only for the servers and network devices or other systems, but even the applications also. We have to have the proper hardening checks and check that how hardened the applications. Okay, and also including the maybe that APIs kind of application interfaces, programming interfaces, and related other any applications. So we have to take it as a whole, and probably yes. When we are talking about that, whether we can probably may need to consider the kind of OWSP, some kind of vulnerabilities, whether it is exist or not exist. Can try always. Further business controls, again, the transaction activities and business counterparties, we have to validate each and every kind of a transaction, whether it is within the boundaries, and is it valid transaction or not. Finally, the physical security is one of the very important things, because most of the time what happens is we have kept our infrastructure very secured and having all kind of logical controls to restrict the access logically from another access. But at the same time, if we are lose a little bit of physical security point of view, the physical access controls, if you are relaxed, then definitely whatever we were whatever amount we spent on, whatever the efforts we put it to protect the assets logically, it will be no use, because ultimately people can enter and they can do any damage to the infrastructure, or maybe sometimes they may have the direct console access. You don't have very good physical control systems. So definitely it is very important to understand, physically also we should avoid any unauthorized physical access, okay, to that equipment, and make sure that equipment is always available, and also you know, uh, available at always, and no damage should happen to that such infrastructure. So some of the areas you should protect is the hosting sites and storage sites and network communication sites and operation facility sites and even the data center facilities. Okay, so credentials, definitely no and limit access. So with this, we just finished the secure your environment, the first objective, and the second one is no and limit access. When it comes to no and limit access, definitely it is we are talking about how you can access the systems and how you can restrict that access for the unauthorized access or no privilege access. The password policy, yeah, what the first point is the password policy. So definitely we should follow the robust password policy to ensure passwords are any kind of attacks. So generally what we call it's brute force attacks or something. So how to avoid such kind of things, and also enforcing effective password policy could be like having some good length passwords. It's mandatory. Make sure the password length is minimum 8 to 12 in between, and it's up to the organization policy, but at the best we can recommend 8 characters and something. And also maybe the password has to be changed time to time. Maybe take it 60 days or 90 days. The user is supposed to change the passwords, and we must implement the password complexity kind. A combination of the different things. Characters or numerics or special characters or symbols. So it make no one can guess your passwords. So this kind of you have to implement the robust password policy, and make sure the passwords policy is being implemented across the organization. Or it's always recommended, and at least the users, operators, the administrators who are having access to this infrastructure should implement all these password policies. Okay, so it becomes very difficult for the malicious attackers to guess the passwords and try to access your systems. Further, it's very important. One more thing, it's additional other than the passwords. Sometimes passwords, even though whatever kind of passwords we use, there is a chance of chance of leakage, or maybe if the other side, if the people use sophisticated tools and technology, probably they can guess the password. So further we want to avoid. So avoiding any unauthorized access. So probably yes, it's one of the another part is multi-factor authentication. So this is very important, and we can prevent. How we can use the multi-factor authentication is, even though every system is asked for a ID password to access the system. Above that, we can add on one more factor, like the tokens or maybe certificate-based authentication. So now it is highly impossible to get both the things. Even if you forget, if you someone guessed your password, but even since they don't have the token, the physical tokens with them, or maybe the certificates not installed on their machines, they may not able to access the system. So this is how actually we can create multi-factor authentication and prevent such kind of attacks. Okay, so generally it is very helpful when you are not sure about we want to just ensure by implementing multi-factor, no another person can access. Okay, so probably the good options are having the tokens, or maybe the OTPs on the mobile and email, or sometimes is a certificate based. You can opt any kind of a thing. So attackers may not have access to both the things. This is the idea of this. Then identities and segregate privileges. It's one of the important thing, and also the weakest link in the entire security, because even though it looks very very simple, right? What is this? Just give the privileges, but we understand it's very difficult to implement control. One of the difficult in the implementing the controls. Okay, but logical access controls, what we are supposed to do is definitely as an organization, when look at the infrastructure, maybe it could be an application, it could be a database, or maybe the network device, or maybe the server, or the PC. Let us understand what kind of a users generally they access these systems, and let us understand their responsibility, the job description, or maybe the job role, what kind of a privileges they require, whether they require the highest privilege or medium privilege or the least privileges, no privilege at all, no access required. So this has to happen, probably. So role-based access control, and it depends on the role, we can define what kind of a privileges we should assign to them, and also that is also has to be properly controlled. I mean, controlled manner. The request has to happen, and someone's supposed to approve the privilege, and then only it should be implemented. Okay, so we have to enforce these security principles. Need to know. I mean, sometimes let's go with the when it says need to know basis, it means go with the zero privileges, no privilege. We don't give the access. Let the person come. No, I need the access of this system. So there is a proper business justification for that. Then you add on the privileges to him or add on the access to him. Okay. So this is one of the best thing we can definitely organization we have to we should implement. Token management and authentication tokens, and connected between the hardware authentication tokens. So how to track and how to manage the tokens and everything. Personal vetting process is nothing but trustworthy, kind of a due diligence, you would say. So that is also very important whenever you are giving access to, or maybe you are appointing some few people into the access this infrastructure, and they are joining. So definitely let us do some due diligence for the people, and make sure that those are not having any the bad reputation or the bad track records. Okay. Physical and logical recorded passwords, and probably yes, it is one of the control we can think of. Sometimes it is a very highly sophisticated, robust access control. I mean, 2 or 3 people are involved to access the specific specialized zones. So in case of some emergency, that what kind of a keys they use, it should be protected in a very secure environment as a physically, so that in case of a person is missing, so at least you have that as a backup. And in some emergency cases, if no one is available, somebody will take authority to get that things done. This is very important. Otherwise, you may lose access to that very important infrastructure. This also we have to take care. Further, definitely the detect and response wise malware protection, the local info protected against malwares. It's nothing but you can, generally the people aware of anti-malware and antivirus, the solutions you should implement within the infrastructure, so that no such malwares can affect your the systems. So it should be protected with the solutions, and rightly it should update always. It's not like you just installed and forgot about that solution. So always there should be a policy, there should be a process to make sure the system is always active, the solution is always active, and it detecting such kind of vectors, attack vectors risk. Further, it should be updated as and when required as per the vendor recommendations. Okay, and so this is very important to protect your systems from any kind of malwares. The software integrity, it is again the input validations, output validations. What kind of input? Most of the time the applications are one of the weakest link again, because if the applications are not built with the proper codes. So the attackers might use that applications to extract the data from the databases. That's one challenge is there. And also further, if you are the input validation is not so, if input validations are not done, and probably the output also, we can't trust that outputs. So always we have to think, input and output wise, the error conditions, etc. Integrity of the database, yes, the other is, because there are various ways we can do this. One is definitely the access controls. Proper authorized persons only supposed to access the database, and the database has to be properly hardened, and also unauthorized access supposed to be and also people can use people not supposed to use any kind of direct database query solution, so that without any proper logical interface, application interface, sometimes people may directly query the databases and extract the data. So we should avoid that kind of situations by maintaining the database integrity. And further, logging and monitoring, it's very important to understand it's not about everything is fine now, but we have to have the proper monitor mechanism to understand and also watch who is actually accessing the systems and how extent. If you find some suspicious activities or behavior of the users or the patterns, then probably yes, it will trigger something, and you can probably prevent some attacks. So this is very important, but that is only possible if you have the proper mechanism to monitor the systems on a regular basis and watch what kind of a traffic it is coming, and what kind of a people are accessing the systems, and what is the behavioral patterns, the access patterns. So all these are very important to watch, and probably we could avoid very attacks in future. Intrusion detection systems, yes, definitely. Any kind of network activities or suspicious network activities, we should use some kind of intrusion detection or prevention systems to look at the packets and look at the traffic, and if possible, I mean, if you feel like this is something malicious, we can drop the packets and we can avoid, and also we can prevent any such kind of attacks on our system. So definitely. It means it is just recommending some kind of IDS, IPS systems to protect our environment. Okay. And detect and response. Incident response is one of the very important things. So if you implement proper incident response systems within your organization, you can avoid, you can escape from so many attacks, and you can avoid a lot many, the unproductive things. So what exactly we require here, at least I would suggest to have a proper incident response plan. I mean, you probably you have to test it, the adequacy of the plan, one thing, and people should aware, if they come across some kind of incidents, what kind of incident, it's a security incident, physical incidents, or any kind of incident, whom to reach, how to reach. This is very important. Most of the time, the organization generally they fail in this particular aspect, right? I mean, incident response planning has to be there. It has to be tested, and it should be communicated properly. And whenever there is an incident, there should be a proper trained people to handle the incidents in the appropriate manner. That's very important. And also, generally, whatever the outcome of that incident and what is the lessons learned, and probably they have to go back and check their incident process. They can make sure there is some kind of improvements they can take it. Okay, so this is something very important. And the second, training and awareness. Obviously, whoever responsible, the people is the weakest link in the security, and that's what everyone says. But at the same time, it is also one of the strongest point also. So it's up to the organization how well they communicate the expectations, and what I mean to say, the expectations from the people, and also how they make sure the people are well aware of what to do and what not to do. So this is only can happen through regular. It's not about one-time training and provide some kind of a training and then just leave it. It should be happen, continuously. It is a process. So people aware every time, and whenever there is a change in the policies, whenever there is a change in the, some kind of a systems, all the people supposed to understand the importance of the security, and they themselves they feel, yes, it is my one of the responsibility to contribute towards this the security initiatives of the organization. So this is very important, and it should happen. And penetration testing, it's again addition to the vulnerability scanning. Vulnerability scanning generally it identifies what kind of vulnerabilities are exist within the systems, and yes, probably you have to fix some bugs and patches and something. Even though only vulnerability scanning not avoid the someone attack your system. So because vulnerabilities are only sometimes we feel like it's not very serious case, but the attackers, they can combine the multiple low category vulnerabilities to use that vulnerabilities to enter into the penetrability of the system. So it is always better to, more than the vulnerability scannings, probably we can take up some white hat people, white hat people or red hat people or gray hat people, to understand how secure our systems by penetrating the systems, and understand where is the loopholes and how the attackers can come inside. And before actually it happened, we should take the ethical hackers, I would say. I mean, instead of the white black, let us focus on the ethical hackers and some experts to understand the attack pattern, the path, so that we can close all the things, so that no one can use the same path to penetrate into the system. So it is very, very specialized, skilled oriented job. This is once if it is happening, so we can close all the doors, the back doors for the attackers. So it's very important. And definitely the risk assessment, already as I mentioned, when it comes to the risk assessment, we need to understand possible risk within our organization or the infrastructure which we want to protect. Definitely the risk assessment has to happen with respect to the people, process, and even the technology wise, and how to maintain the confidentiality, risk towards the confidentiality, risk towards the integrity, risk towards the availability, risk towards the authenticity. Okay, so once we understand the various risk wise, by identifying the various threats and what is our current weakness in the systems, probably you understand the risk with the impact, and you can identify how to counter that risk, how to minimize that risk by implementing various measures. Okay, so this is the detect and respond. So when it comes to there are various security, SWIFT actually recommended some specific timelines, self attestations, SWIFT mandatory, wherein self attestation is it's already now it's become mandatory. So anybody can do. Generally, it's done by the internal teams of the team, the institutions, and SWIFT mandatory. It is one of the mandatory. When the SWIFT inform the institutions, institutions to perform the CSCF from the external independent external party assessment bodies, and community standard, all users, it is internal or external, you are supposed to do this. So again you have to check. Again, we have to check these timelines with the SWIFT website, so that you will get more clear understanding. And generally, the pattern is like this: the timelines, if the user community. Now it's already already now it's second quarter finished already in 2021. So from this point onwards, if any organization they want to attach themselves for this CSCF, that's it is only through v2021 only. That's according to the latest information. And after 2021, definitely you have to as a user community, you have to do the independent assessment. Again it's a little subjective, but as per my understanding, independent is someone who is not related involved in this managing this infrastructure. So probably, I mean, is it external party or external qualified auditors, or maybe somebody from the audit teams from the internal groups. We can think of and about that. But these are the timelines. It's highly recommended to know before taking any decisions. You probably have to check the SWIFT Swift guidelines, what they are saying, and because due to this pandemic situation, they are actually changing the timelines also. They are giving some relaxations, so probably you have to check back with them. But yes, now it is CSCF is a very important framework to attest whether it is internally, whether it is externally. No, but always make sure it is an independent assessment has to happen. Okay, and also there is a self-attestations provisions also. Whenever you are doing the self-attestation, there is a question you have to answer yes whether you are independently assessed this mandatory requirements or not. So this is very important to understand the timelines. Already we crossed that the 2021 whatever the timelines they provided earlier. Now, very important thing, what so far we discussed about, various controls required by the CSCF. The recommended controls, whether it is a mandatory or advisory. So far we discussed that. Now, depends on the architecture type which generally the organization use. They can, there are some of the controls is applicable, some of the controls is not applicable. So this is again, it's one of the, another area of the discussion. So we don't generally get into what kind of controls are applicable, but whatever controls so far we discussed, in the previous slides, you can consider, all are good practices. If you are implementing everything is fantastic, and otherwise you can choose, only the mandatory controls wise. Now, architecture types, yes, definitely as a organization you should know what kind of architecture being used within your organization, and basis on that the infrastructure controls, what is the controls are applicable for that infrastructure. Okay, as we rightly mentioned here, which components are part of the scope of the assessment, it depends on the architecture. So let us look into that various architectures. A1 architecture, where is entire control of the mainly I just bifurcates. It says a messaging interface and the communication interface. As you rightly mentioned, if you look at this architecture, one is external connectivity with the Swift network, and if you look at the back office and some middleware clients is something which is and they're actually having some interconnectivity with the Swift architecture, Swift systems. That is where the Swift infrastructure kind of a messaging and the communication interfaces. HSM is the hardware security module, and GUI interface for the users, and the end user and administrators is the operator sides. Even though they are part of the overall security controls and scope. But if you look at the secure zone, which we addressed so far, Swift architecture or Swift infrastructure or the secure zone is, there is a boundary of this messaging interface and communication interface. So basically these are the kind of applications provided by the Swift itself. Okay, those applications you installed on the specific way, and the end operators and the administrator always they connect with this infrastructure, the secure zone infrastructure, whatever systems are in place, and there will be some middlewares to exchange some data from the back office systems to Swift infrastructure. And the fourth element is the connectivity to the Swift network for authentication authorization. So generally this is everything. If you look at this, the messaging interface, the blue color boundary, the communication interface, if SNL and HSM GUI, if everything is there within your under control and you install that, then probably you can consider that as a architecture A1. Okay. Now, if you look at that, even there is sometimes it is also feasible that communication interface only within your environment, not the business messaging interface. The messaging interface, the RMA, both are not under your control, but you have the systems in place to GUI, the graphical user interface, and the communication interface, and HSM in your local area, local setup. So in such case also we can consider this is also A1, and A2 is something the communication interface is not at all under your control. It is provided by some other service providers, other service companies, and you are only communicating with them for have only locally messaging interface only, but no communication interface. In such case, it is considered as a A2 architecture. Okay. then you don't have even the messaging connector, Swift connector to connect your internal, internal. It's always there. If you look at this, the back office and the back office middleware clients are connecting, and the Swift connector is connecting to the service provider. Like there is an examples also which we have given, the Alliance Cloud API Gateway and Light 2. I mean, these are the service providers. Probably your organization is connecting to them. Then it is a probably the A3 architecture, and then A4 middleware file transfer, only there is a provision for file transferring. Nothing is in your much not in the scope. It's very simple architecture. There is a file server file transfer solution in between, like IBM HQ MQ server or something, and it's only facilitate the application to application communication between you and the service provider. Okay, so in such case it is a A4 and a homemade API connector also. You can connect it. And A4 is no local user footprint. Basically, infrastructure component, no component is there inside of your network. I mean, it's just only through there is a GUI they provided. That's all. You have to communicate through the GUI. That's enough. And the request just goes from you and nothing else. Everything is outside. It's not under your control. So in such case, that's architecture called ZB. But I would recommend highly, because it's not so easy to understand this architecture type. So whenever you want to determine your architecture, need more in-depth understanding of the current infrastructure, so that it takes time. But yes, you have to determine before the assessment or the attestation, you have to make sure what kind of architecture you are using, which is in place. Then basis on that, some of the controls applicable, some components are not applicable. So it takes a little bit more time to understand. You should spend time with your the internal teams, or maybe the external parties who are helping you in this Swift CSCF compliance achievement. So it is a little technical. So without understanding the architecture type, it is difficult to understand the overall applicability. So it is always better to try to figure out what architecture currently you are using, and probably you should have talks with the Swift representatives, whoever actually connected with you, or maybe the subject matter experts of the Swift. Okay. Then here actually just already the architecture types, the applicability which shown, like if you are A1 to A3 architecture, then what kind of controls are applicable here, and the B types, what kind of controls are applicable. Okay, so this is a control applicability, multi-factor. So whatever so far we discussed is various controls. It depends on the architecture type. So it is always important to have this information in hand. Please determine what architecture type you are using, so that you can see what the controls are applicable for your organization. Okay, basis on that you can start doing an independent assessment. Okay, either internal or external. So this is what it is. And now coming to the generally the framework, what kind of components we are supposed to get in the scope of the assessment. So if you look at that, in the CSCF security framework, they very clearly mentioned. One is definitely the production environment. I mean, here the production environment is nothing but the messaging interfaces, what we so far discussed, the messaging interface, the communication interface, applications, and the operator systems, and the administrative operator systems connecting, and also the back office connectors. There is interfaces, they are connecting to the secure zone, infrastructure. So everything is a production environment. It's a live environment where the transactions initiate. That is production environment. And definitely when you have a DR environment wherein as a business continuity point of view, then definitely we need to consider the DR also with respect to the security, Swift infrastructure. Okay. So the production environment is 100%, it is under the scope of the assessment. You should consider all the components within the assessment. Further, if you are replicating or using some DR, disaster recovery sites, wherein some of the components are might be real time, the data is transferred or stored, then definitely you have to have, you have to consider that DR into your scope as well. Okay. And if you are storing some data in the backup environment, if you maintain some backup environment, then yes, definitely all these three environment has to be under the scope. Yeah, now the question comes, if I don't have the backup environment, no worries, whatever environment is under currently you are using, it should be there. Definitely production environment must be there, right? Sometimes you may not have the DR, you may not have the backup, but the production environment must be there. So definitely that environment come under the scope. When we are talking about the environment, it is a consist of definitely three things. If you look at that, as I already mentioned, the people, process, technology, the people, the operators, or anybody who is involved in this entire operations. The devices is the devices is the infrastructure. Infrastructure has to be there, and we have to consider all the kind of components, applications, databases, connecting devices, interfaces, etc. The systems is basically the process which you generally follow. What kind of systems you follow is a documented process. Either policies or procedures or standard operating guidelines. So anything, all these things we have to consider while performing the assessment. So we cannot skip anything here because everything is having their own the weightage to maintain the overall security of the architecture. Then yes, definitely what we are talking about, the components wise, the local Swift infrastructure. This is a, whether it is a GUI, whether it is application, whether it is a HSM, anything, data exchange layers, the data interfaces, what the back office systems, so Swift infrastructure, and also there is a local the messaging queues. So all these are application layers, data exchange layers. So those things also, the connectors also we need to consider. And the third one is the operator, their pieces, because that is very important. From actually the transaction initiation happens from there. So our aim is to protect end-to-end transaction security, the data security, right? So this is what it is, the entire the scope of the assessment. One is again, production environment has to be there, and the production environment, the operators, devices, systems, the people, process, technology, with respect to the local Swift infrastructure, operator PCs, and data exchange layers. So this is what under our scope. Now, okay, when it comes to this approach, it's generally, this is what generally when we performing the readiness assessments or maybe the compliance assessment for this as per the CSCF. Generally, this is what our approach to how to deal with this kind of request from the customers. So generally, there is a probably the approach is the kickoff meeting. Start with the kickoff meeting, and definitely we should have a proper assessment plan, so that because it's a lot many departments might be involved in the assessment, like your IT infrastructure people, and somebody from the administration side, and somebody from the physical security point of view. We may need to involve the physical administrators who are actually watching, monitoring 24/7 the physical location, and also the compliance officers, or might be the decision makers or authorized people. So it's very, it's a lot many people may involve, and so definitely we should have the proper plan of assessment or the interaction, so that the things can be properly understood, and then accordingly we can select in the information gathering side, as we discussed, what kind of architecture you are using, and again determine that maybe sometimes before actual assessment or actual assessment, we should see, is it really what you claim to be, right? So whether it is we need to have the proper understanding of the information gathering techniques, like what kind of components are there, some policies you are following, and the current status of the various controls which is recommended by this, mentioned by this CSCF. So Then identify in scope components, that is also after the determining the architecture, definitely what devices we should consider into the scope of the assessment, so that we can probably, for example, we were discussing about the hardening, if we understand how many applications are involved, then we can see how many databases are involved, then we can see the hardening of that, how many systems, how many servers are there. So all these things matter. So we need to understand all the in-scope components once we finalize the architecture type. Then yes, again, as applicability point of view, the mandatory and advisory controls, as we discussed already, there are 31 controls. Some controls are mandatory, some controls are advisory. So once we decided, then we should you should do the validation of this controls by probably, yes, some of the validation methods is checking with some the authorized person or the process owner of the specific component, and you can interview them and understand how they're doing that, and further the verification of the settings, the system's configuration settings. By doing that, you can also check, yes, the specific control has been implemented or not implemented. And also sometimes by observe, I mean, for example, when we are talking about the physical security controls, if you look at the the CCTVs are functioning, there is a display is happening, so we can observe that, yeah, it's functional, and I can see whoever coming, going, outside, inside, I can see the movements of the people, and this is some kind of observation, and the people are wearing the badges. Yeah, it means it is something which you can observe. And further, definitely the records. Sometimes authenticity point of view, we should look after the the records and review some documents like policies, procedures, the risk assessments and everything. So generally, predominantly, you can validate these control implementation by any of these following methods, or combination of these methods of the interviews, verifications, settings, observations, and review the things. Then finally, yes, there is a problem. There is a templates forms provided by the Swift itself for the beneficial of the assessors. So all the findings will be documented in that, and also there is a assessment completion letter. Also, you will get it. That is also the draft template is provided by the Swift. So basically, this is the assessment approach. It is very simple and straightforward approach. This is what it is, and as I mentioned, definitely the assessment covers the people, process, technology. Okay, what is the outcome? I mean, of this assessments is basically the executive level report is one of the the report we will generally will get it, and also assessment findings generally it is provided in the particular templates provided by the Swift. Then a formal assessment report and the completion report. These are mandatory to at least hold it, because any point of time the Swift asks for that, you have to submit all these things, all the things. And yes, the cybersecurity, some service providers listings is already there. I mean, it's not mandatory. Please make think that it is not saying that we are the only people, but it's recommended. That's all. But it is up to the organizations to identify their assessments. And here, yeah, our company name is also part of that service providers listing. So this is QRC team and. QRC team, this is our company growth, and I think this should take care by Erika or somebody. If any doubts.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you, Mr. Ramsey, for that informative and very insightful presentation. It really shed some light and gave us more understanding of the objectives, principles, and controls of the Swift CSCF framework, of course. Now, before we proceed to the Q&A session, we actually have a few number of questions from our attendees. We will just run through a brief QRC company profile, which Mr. Abhishek will be assisting with the slides. Right, to start, with QRC's growth story. QRC was established in 2016 as a security consulting firm. By that time, we also started the security testing division and other security and privacy framework implementation support. That year, we only served one country, which is India. And by the next year, we were already a qualified assessor company for PCI, DSS, and PA-DSS. We were also able to launch a couple of products, including Data Discovery Tool and GRC Manager. And by 2018, we were already serving more than 9 countries and regions, including India, USA, UK, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. Now, come 2019, we already had PCI, SLC, and PCI 3DS, and we were also published in the directory of SWIFT as SWIFT Assessment Provider. We also have ISO certification body for ISO or IEC. And by 2021, we were already serving more than 25 countries and regions, including India, USA, UK, Middle East, Africa, Bangladesh, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. Now, if you can see on the bottom part of the slide, you will see that by 2020, QRC was already serving more than 250 clients, and we're able to give more than 1,600 security assessments. Next slide, please. And here we can see the qualifications and recognitions. We have the Qualified Security Assessor for USA, Europe, CMEA, and Asia Pacific. We have the Payment Application Qualified Security Assessor for Asia Pacific, Software Security Framework Qualified Security Assessor for USA, Europe, CMEA, and Asia Pacific, and the 3DS Qualified Security Assessor for USA, Europe, CMEA, and Asia Pacific, all of which can be found in the PCI Council website. We have also been published in the directory of SWIFT as assessment provider, which can also be found in the SWIFT website. And we were also published in the CERT-In website as an empaneled organization, which again can be found in the CERT-In website. Next slide, please. Right, now, QRC being an expert in the cybersecurity space, we also provide these services or certifications. Our certifications include PCI DSS, PA-DSS, PCI 3DS, PCI SSF, and we also have the SWIFT CSCF assessment and assessment for SOC 1, 2, and 3. We also have certifications for ISMS and PIMS, and assessments for HIPAA compliance and GDPR compliance, and of course, the information system audits. Next slide, please. For the security testing related services, our security services include vulnerability scans, penetration testing, thick client application security testing, web application security, mobile application security, API security testing, POS device application security testing. We also have secure code review, data discovery scan, network security review, system or server security review, and network segmentation penetration testing. Next slide, please. Now, you will see in this screen some of our well-known clients in India, Europe, Middle East, America, APAC, and Africa. You might be familiar with some of these logos because these are companies that are quite well known. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I guess that is it for this afternoon's webinar. Again, I would really like to thank all the attendees and our panelists and speakers for carving out the time to really give us more information to make us understand more. And we had a couple of questions earlier from our attendees, which were already addressed by Mr. Venkata Reddy. Thank you, sir, for that.
Thank you.
If we still have any questions, please feel free to send them through, and maybe our speakers or some of our panelists can answer them. Oh, we actually have one question. How do SWIFT participants notice from SWIFT that has been selected to do independent assessment?
Yeah, actually, the SWIFT generally they inform the participant user community to go for the independent assessment. Okay, so you see the point number one, they specifically not only independent assessment. Independent assessment is a criteria, but they will specify the external assessment. External assessment. It's not an independent assessment. Independent assessment, even internal or external, it should be independent. But the question should be like how the Swift generally what is happens here. The process is like this. All the user institutions, they will confirm to the Swift they are complying with this CSCF. So in few cases, the Swift generally they will ask them to submit the independent external assessment reports. So this is what it is generally happens. It is already started. If you need to do that, then Swift directly approach you and they will inform you by email or any other way around. Whoever your contact person from the for the Swift, they will intimate that particular person. So that's how it is. But when it comes to the independent assessment, every audit has to be independent according to the Swift guidelines. I know you cannot, if you are an IT infra manager and you are responsible for the Swift architecture maintenance, and you can't do, you cannot do, your own assessment. So it's a conflict of interest. So that point in time, you have to look for some independent person or independent body to perform the assessment as per this framework and provide the report. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. We also have another question from our attendees. How do we identify which architecture we are using? Because some architectures are really similar.
Okay, you see, yes, that's what exactly I have also mentioned during my explanation, because like for example A1 and A2 is most likely it's a similar, because the difference is only in the A1 the messaging interface will be there, and A2 the messaging interface is not there. So it's not so difficult, frankly speaking, because what are the components which currently you are using within this, performing this transaction. That's once we understand that, then basis on that we can determine what kind of architecture you are using. For example, you are using, if the question is like, okay, you have already messaging also and communication also, then yes, probably it is a A1 architecture. But if you are not using any messaging interface, you are only having the communication interface within your organization, then yes, it is A2 architecture. Like this, there is a couple of questions we should be in a position to answer. Basis on that, we can determine what architecture you are using. Okay. And if you don't have any component within you, you have just provision with a small connector, then it is A4 architecture. Nothing, you don't have anything, simply the users only initiate the transaction by using some application given by the Swift. That's all it means. It might be the B. So this is how actually we have to determine. Yes, agree. Everything looks similar, but for this, as I mentioned, determining the architecture, we need to answer a couple of questions and also understand the review of the current infrastructure diagram or network diagram to see what components are involved in that. Yeah.
Okay, I guess that would be all. Do we still have any questions?
So,
Okay,
yeah.
I guess we don't have any more questions. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you so much to everyone who attended, especially to our speakers, Mr. Ramsey and Ms. Sloan, for sharing their knowledge this afternoon. Again, thank you and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Erika, being a good moderator, and thanks, Lone Anderson, because arranging this kind of a session. And thanks to everyone, all the participants, and all the other panelists for make this successful. Thank you once again. Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, as was said, please reach out to us. We're happy to help. We're happy to have conversations around how we can help you with your questions or with achieving compliance. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.